The termination letter hit the desk with a sound so small it shouldn't have been able to shatter a man's entire world, but for Theodore Banks, it did exactly that, right there in front of his co-workers, with no explanation and no warning. Theodore had worked at Whitmore Logistics for 6 years, ever since his wife passed and left him alone to raise their son, Caleb, who was only 3 at the time. He took the warehouse shift job because it paid steady and let him be home by the time Caleb's school bus arrived. He never missed a shift, never complained about the long hours lifting crates in the cold, never asked for more than what was fair. His co-workers respected him. His supervisor relied on him. But none of that mattered the morning the company's new owner, a sharp-eyed young executive named Renata Cole, walked the warehouse floor with a clipboard and, without a single conversation, ordered him let go. Renata had inherited the company after her father's sudden passing, and she was determined to prove to the board, to the industry, to herself, that she wasn't just some heiress playing at business. She'd been told the warehouse was overstaffed, that cuts needed to happen fast to satisfy nervous investors, and she'd pointed to names on a list without faces attached to them. Theodore's name was one of 12. She didn't know his story. She didn't know about Caleb, about the mornings Theodore packed lunches with shaking, exhausted hands after working overnight, about the quiet dignity he carried through every hardship life handed him. To her, in that moment, he was simply a line item. Theodore didn't argue. He didn't cause a scene. He simply nodded, gathered the few belongings from his locker, and walked out into the parking lot where the afternoon sun felt far too bright for how heavy his chest had become. He sat in his car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, wondering how he would explain this to an 8-year-old boy who believed his father could fix anything. If you believe good people deserve second chances, and that dignity should never depend on a person's job title, hit like, leave a comment, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Hope and Wisdom, because stories like Theodore's deserve to be seen. Word of the firing spread quietly through the warehouse over the following days, and something unexpected began stirring beneath the surface. The workers who knew Theodore best began talking, not in protest, but in memory, recalling the time he stayed 2 extra hours to help a new employee catch up without ever mentioning it to a manager, the time he gave his own coat to a shivering delivery driver during a freak snowstorm, the countless small kindnesses that never made it onto any performance review. Somehow, those stories reached further than anyone expected, drifting from warehouse floor to office hallway, until they reached the desk of someone who hadn't been in that building in over a decade. Renata's father, before his passing, had built more than just a logistics company. He'd built relationships, quiet debts of gratitude that stretched far beyond spreadsheets. Renata hadn't fully understood that inheritance until she received a phone call 3 days after Theodore's termination from a name she vaguely recognized from her father's old contacts, a man who introduced himself simply as representing an associate who wanted to know why one of the best men in that building had just lost his job. Renata brushed it off at first, certain it was some misunderstanding, some warehouse gossip inflated beyond reason. But the calls didn't stop. And then, on a gray Thursday morning, as she stood near the warehouse entrance reviewing quarterly numbers she barely understood, she heard it before she saw it, the low, synchronized hum of engines, growing louder, closer, until the parking lot outside filled with the unmistakable sight of 10 black SUVs rolling in, one after another, in perfect formation. Renata froze. Employees around her stopped mid-motion, murmurs rippling through the floor as doors began opening in unison. Men in dark suits stepped out first, followed by others carrying folders, tablets, quiet authority in every movement. And then, stepping out from the center vehicle, walked a man Renata's father used to speak of with the kind of reverence usually reserved for mentors, a man named Julian Ashford, one of the most influential investors quietly connected to half the boards in the city, a man who rarely appeared anywhere in person anymore. Julian walked directly toward Renata, his expression calm but unmistakably serious, and said only, "I heard you let go of Theodore Banks." It wasn't a question. Renata's mouth went dry as she realized, with sinking clarity, that Theodore wasn't simply some warehouse worker. He had once, years ago, worked alongside her father during the company's hardest years, had personally kept operations running during a crisis that nearly bankrupted them, and had asked for nothing in return except quiet, steady work to support his son. Julian, an old friend of her father's, had never forgotten that loyalty. Renata stood there, the weight of her mistake pressing down harder than any board meeting ever had, and for the first time since taking over the company, she understood that leadership wasn't measured in numbers alone, but in the people you choose to see or overlook. Without hesitation, she asked Julian for a chance to fix what she'd broken. She found Theodore that same afternoon, sitting quietly at his kitchen table while Caleb did homework beside him, and she apologized, not with corporate language, but with real, humbled honesty. She offered him his position back, along with a promotion he deserved long before that day, and a promise that she would learn every name on every list before ever making a decision again. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that character always outlasts circumstance. Before we go, if you felt something while watching this, comment the word "grace" so I know this story reached you. Theodore returned to work not as a man who had been forgotten, but as one finally seen, and Caleb grew up watching his father stand taller, not because of the title he now held, but because of the quiet, unshakable integrity that had been there all along, waiting simply for someone to notice.